Yeah, assuming this is the cold open right now, what would you say?
I would say that I'm really excited about this episode, but also looking forward to joining our great audiences for another live program this Thursday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern.
I'll be
That's
there.
Thursday, February 6th. Another edition of the D3 Datacast Live.
Live!
We're coming off a glorious week of Division III basketball. It's time for another D3 Datacast. Zach Snyder back here with Matt Snyder as always. Matt, this is a fun time of year. The calendar has officially changed over to February, which is a big month in our family. Happy birthday to the D3 Datacast mom and Calvin basketball super fan celebrating a birthday on February 2nd. Happy birthday, mom. We love you. Thanks for the support. And Matt, I'll point this out because you don't want me to. It's also your birthday week. Wednesday, February 5, you will be celebrating a birthday. So everyone, wish Matt a happy birthday in the comment section. Hit the thumbs up button to wish Matt a happy birthday. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Matt, say a few words as our birthday boy here on the show.
Yeah, let's talk about basketball.
All right, we do have quite a bit of basketball to talk about. Um, I've been looking forward to this episode for a while, Matt. As we said, the calendar has changed. We've really, I think, officially entered the stretch run here towards the tournament. We're going to officially unveil our bubble watch for the 2025 tournament. We're going to take a look who's looking good, who's, maybe going to be towards that bubble. How's that bubble shaping up? We've got a lot of teams in the mix. The D3 Datacast computer's been working overtime, firing off 1,000 simulations to see how the season may play out, who could be in line for those at-large bids. Of course, teams are focused on winning that automatic qualifier from their conference. But as those conference races are playing out in front of everyone's eyes, behind the scenes, there's another race playing out, and that's for jockeying for position in NPI for those coveted at-large bids. There's only 21 of those, but we need 21 to fill out a 64-team bracket, and the competition will be fierce. All right, Matt, we've seen another week of play. It's time for you to submit another top 25 ballot for the D3Hoops.com top 25 poll. Take us through what you've got for this week, having seen a lot of really big games. I think have the potential to shake up the order from your ballot from the week before.
Yeah, so here's my new top 25 ballot. We did have some pretty big results this week. Wesleyan stays at my number one spot. They had a big win this week over Tufts, so that is a nice win for Wesleyan. They already have several. They are the lone undefeated remaining here in Division III basketball, and they look good. And they're not number one just because they're undefeated. They've played good games by now. They've won against other good teams. I think they're deserving of a top spot here. Illinois Wesleyan slides up into number two. We had another big game. Trine took a loss this week, so Illinois Wesleyan slides up a spot. They've been playing pretty well. They got some big wins in the CCIW this week, so they slide up to number two. NYU, there's a big UAA weekend that we are just coming off of. Zach, we're recording here on a Sunday night. We just finished some big games here. NYU went over to the Midwest. They beat Chicago. They beat WashU, both on the road, both by big scoring margins. So NYU had a great weekend. I think we talk a lot about the UAA travel, and it's crazy, and how Sunday can be a big day. But NYU went to WashU after playing at Chicago this weekend. Looked great in both games, big scoring margins. So they are back up into kind of the top upper echelon of my ballot at number three. UW Platteville slides up a position to number four. They've been kind of in that range for me for a little while. And WashU, we just talked about that loss that they took. They went 1-1 on the weekend. They did take the loss to NYU after beating Brandeis. I didn't punish them too much for that. They just slide to number five. WashU's losses on the year are now a game against Chicago, a game against NYU, and a game against Illinois Wesleyan. Those are losses that a lot of teams are going to take. So I didn't want to rocket WashU down my list because they're losing to other teams that are similarly skilled or a little bit above them or whatever. So I think WashU is still a really good team. I still believe in WashU, and kind of that top five-ish position feels right. I think you could have them lower, but when you get lower, there's some teams that, there might have some questions about them as well. So I think WashU is still in the mix for me in that kind of top 10 for sure, maybe top five-ish range. We mentioned how Wesleyan knocked off Tufts. I'm going to skip down maybe more to the middle of my position. I have Tufts at number 16 now. They took two losses this week. Really, really tough kind of back-to-backs. They had to play Wesleyan and Trinity, Connecticut, both on the road. They lost both of those games. I had them one position behind Trinity, Connecticut last week, and now they're 4 or 5 spots behind Trinity, Connecticut this week. So difficult for Tufts. 2 games they're expected to lose. They do lose them both. I think they maybe had a chance in that Wesleyan game, especially, to win that one. But ultimately, they did not. So I still think they're good. I still think they're quality. But I think for me, the order in the NESCAC has a little bit solidified: Wesleyan 1, Trinity 2, Tufts 3, and that kind of plays out in my ballot here. They're still the only 3 that I'm ranking. There's a few more that are maybe in the next group, not really, really close to my ballot, but teams like Hamilton, still good, but not in my top 25. Other big results, and a team that did jump up several spots in my ballot, Calvin had a big win this week. They went on the road to Trine, who was number 2 in the D3Hoops.com poll last week. And they got the road win. So Calvin goes from 25 to 18 on my ballot. I know that's a pretty big jump. Since early December for me, or right around that point, they've been playing about as well as anyone in Division III basketball. They have road wins against UW La Crosse. They have a road win against Trine. They've beaten St. John's. So some good stuff out of Calvin lately after that really, really tough start that started the season, right? A buzzer beater loss to UW Platteville, who's also high. So they've been playing really well recently. They took a jump up. I think right now they are looking quite strong. John Carroll took a loss. They went down a few spots in my ballot, but I kept them in at number 21. They lost a road game to Marietta. They were another team like Calvin that was streaking, had a big winning streak put together, and that it was kind of turning their season around after a few losses in a row. They still look good. They still look good in the OAC. They did take a loss at Marietta, so I moved them down a little bit for that. The other team that tumbled actually quite a bit for me was Denison. I have them down at 24. They lost at Kenyon, which is not a super strong loss to have. Denison, I considered maybe, like, do I take them all the way out? I decided ultimately to keep them in. I did struggle my last couple of spots at finding teams I really, really liked in the top 25, but I did keep Denison in there at 24 and Virginia Wesleyan at 25, even after they took a loss to Randolph-Macon. It was just kind of difficult for me at the last couple of spots to find teams I really liked. I'm always considering a team like Roanoke in my top 25 ballot. They're still just out for me. They also took a loss to Randolph-Macon this week. Catholic, I think, is in the mix. They had some kind of shaky results, even results that they won, like an overtime game against Moravian. Not a result I like to see for a team that's trying to get up into my top 25 ballot. If you're playing that overtime game, considering like another landmark conference team, Drew, they're not quite there for me yet, but they're another team that's in the mix in that spot. Gustavus Adolphus in the MIAC, they're putting together a nice little run here, a good resume. I really want to see them against maybe a more upper echelon team like St. John's. I think they're only going to play St. John's once this year, and it's closer to the end of the season. So it's for both Gustavus and St. John's, what they're doing against maybe the middle and bottom of the MIAC, it's a little bit like, it's good. It's good. They're doing good stuff there, but it's not like enough for me to give them big jumps necessarily. And then there's another bunch of teams that I'm considering. Whitworth, I'm really considering Whitworth for one of those spots. They have a really nice win at Cal Lutheran, but other than that, for me, there's not a ton there, like really good wins wise. They have a couple of head scratching losses in the mix. Whitworth's a good team. They have a pretty good resume, but for me, it's not like a slam dunk top 25 resume. So they're in that mix that I'm considering. And a bunch of teams like we talked about last week in the next 50, Stockton, Stevens Point, Claremont Mudscripts, Carthage, North Park had a good win at Carthage. They're kind of maybe in that mix for me, not quite making my top 25. Guilford, some other teams, but kind of the mix of those usual suspects. I'm looking at their results, their resumes, kind of thinking, do I think they're as good as these other teams? Maybe yes, maybe no. For right now, I'm thinking no. And so that's kind of who's in, who's out right now for me.
As I'm looking at, Matt, maybe the top 10, 12, 15, I feel like there hasn't been a lot of movement in and out of kind of that range. Maybe in the overall poll, but in your ballot, as we look at this week to week, I feel like we've kind of been looking at the same kind of teams all season in that range. And it's just a matter of what order they're going to go in from week to week, based on what happens, what we learn from the games that have been played that week. And all that's to say, I think that what we're seeing is to shape up for this season is very similar to what we had going into the tournament last year, where Hampton Sydney was very strong throughout the regular season, but there was really a pretty decent sized group of teams that, as we got into the tournament, you felt like had a chance to win it all. And I feel like that's kind of what we're seeing again here, where we've had this consistent, you could maybe say, okay, the top five is,
Mhm.
a head and shoulders group above, whoever's coming in that 8 to 10 range. But just in terms of the overall names in the top, whatever you want to call it, 10, 12, 15 has been pretty consistent. And I think it's shaping up to be another situation of who's just playing the best basketball that time of year as we get into those tournament runs. And, there's going to be, um, could be a dozen teams that as we get into tournament play, you're not going to be surprised if they're in the Final Four or winning it all.
Yeah. A couple things I'll say in response to that. One is take a look at like a team like Chicago. They lost a game this week. I don't think I moved them at all. I think they were number 20 for me last week and number 20 this week. Like they beat Brandeis pretty well and they lose to NYU. So that's like a game you should win and a game you probably should lose. So just because you take a loss, I'm not going to necessarily jump you down. I think a lot of these teams, NYU, Wash U, they're playing each other. You think they're both pretty good. A team's going to take a loss. It doesn't necessarily automatically mean you need to take a big fall. Tufts playing Wesleyan and Trinity, or Trinity, I think it was a week ago, played Wesleyan. When you have good teams playing other good teams, someone has to take a loss. It doesn't mean they have to come out in context with all of their results, right? If one team is already shaky, you might move them quite a bit. But, Trine losing to Calvin doesn't mean Trine's all of a sudden out. So I think for the most part, I think we've seen a lot of losses to other teams within the top 25. And so that doesn't necessarily completely alter the picture, is one thing. But the other thing about like a lot of teams being in the mix, like for sure, I don't think it's just like the top four. If we were in Fort Wayne and a team like UW La Crosse was there, I don't think you or I would be like really surprised to see like a team like UW La Crosse in the Final Four. Absolutely, they can make it. We've seen them all season long be a really good team. We've seen other teams from like the middle of the poll this time to make big runs. Feel like that's kind of maybe where Trinity was. Kind of they're making their they're ascending up the pole last year going into the tournament, and they kind of made that run into the Final Four. A team like Trine maybe was also in a similar spot, and they could do that as well. So yeah, I wouldn't even put a number on it necessarily. I think for sure like the top 12, I don't think I would be surprised to see any of those teams in the Final Four. Would you be surprised to see Christopher Newport at 14 in a Final Four? I don't think so. So I think we're going to be wide open when we get to the tournament, and I think it's going to be a really interesting, like that NPI race you said to the finish feels like all season long it's the early going, and all of a sudden it's February and then it's the end, and we're in that mode right now. We're in the stretch run. Games are really important. The NPI is going to shift. We're going to get our tournament field picture coming up here, and then the field is going to be wide open as far as who can win any games in March.
Yeah, for sure. And you talk about some of those head-to-heads within the top 25, and then as you're putting together a ballot, you're going to be deferential to who won this matchup versus who lost this matchup. But play that game again, and you wouldn't necessarily be surprised if the team who lost the first game won that. So you got a bunch of teams that are very capable of beating other top 25 teams, and so we get into the tournament, and it's just going to be a matter of who's having an off day that day, or how the matchup works that day. I think there's been a lot of these top 25 matchups where if there was a 7-game series, you wouldn't expect it to be a sweep.
Yeah.
So in a one and done situation, it's just how is it going to play out that day? Going to be very interesting to watch. All right, Matt, we've teased the bubble watch. It's time to dive into it. Let's get going. While every team is going to want to be focused on securing their conference's automatic qualifier, there is this question that's going to be brewing in the minds of fans and teams out there. What if we need an at-large bid? Do we have a chance? Are we going to get in? And so that's why we're kicking off the 2025 bubble watch here, Matt. We fired up the D3 Datacast computer using the efficiency ratings as a basis for assigning team quality, and then using those simulations to play out the rest of the season 1,000 times, and then applying NPI based on that, right? So based on the season played to date as is, plus 1,000 simulations of what is yet to be played, with the efficiency rating serving as the underlying basis for team quality, and 1,000 season simulations. So each 0.1% of the odds that we're going to show here represent one result in those 1,000 simulations. Anything else on methodology, Matt, that you want to cover before we get into this?
No, you run each season over and over again, and you get some extreme results on either side. Teams that are kind of marginal, maybe running the table. Teams that are really good, taking several losses. So you get to see a range of outcomes, a range of possible outcomes. You look at the end of season NPI. So this year it's really easy just to select the top teams that didn't win their conference, right? Because we're seeding and running conference tournaments during all of this. So we can see what are the most likely outcomes given team strength and given NPI as far as what might happen as we go on here, or what teams want to see happen around them in order to maybe secure spots, feeling better about their spot on the bubble or a little bit worse about their spot and needing to go get that pool A.
And for each matchup yet to be played this season, in a lot of cases, maybe it's easy to determine who a favorite would be. But of course, the favorite doesn't always win. And that's why we run 1,000 simulations, because there might be a matchup that the efficiency ratings say is like a 60% win probability for one side, a 40% on the other. Over the course of 1,000 simulations, you'd expect that game plays out such that, the favorite wins 600 of those simulations and the underdog wins 400, right? That's how the 60-40 plays out. And then that's a snapshot in time for what is yet to be played. And then as the season progresses and those 60-40 matchups turn into 0% and 100% results, that's going to have a big impact on any future simulations. So that's kind of, just want to explain that, Matt, because a lot of what we do on d3datacast.com really ties into this. Of course, there's the efficiency ratings that are published, and so you can see on an adjusted basis like who the top teams are in terms of that. But then that feeds into the daily game predictions page that is set up on d3datacast.com. Based on those efficiency ratings, you can determine like what based on those ratings a most likely outcome would be for a game, and that kind of all serves as the basis for running these simulations. So it's important to understand kind of how it works or where it comes from, and how basically everything we do on d3datacast.com ties in this manner.
Your Patreon dollars at work. So, Zach, we're going to categorize teams today into 5 categories when we're talking about the bubble watch, the tournament bubble, as we go into the stretch run in February. We're going to say teams that are locks or near locks. That's teams that have 99% of the time or greater in these simulations, they received a Pool C bid when they needed it. So for the rest of this conversation, we're not going to talk about the Pool A bids. It's just if you happen to not win your Pool A, how often did you get the Pool C then if you needed it? So category 1, locks and near locks. Number 2 is going to be solid. Got to be careful how I say that, but that's 75% to 99% odds in the simulation. Looking ahead, how many times did they secure it? More than 75% of the time, we call those teams solid. Bubble in were teams between 50% and 75%, so a little bit more likely than not, but they're kind of teetering on the edge here. Depending on what all happens in the landscape around them and how they perform, they might get in a little bit more frequently than not. Then on the other side of that is bubble out. Teams that still have pretty good chances of making it in, but were less likely to get in than they were to be on the outside looking in. So that's 25 to 50%. And then we're calling right now probably out. We just drew the line at 25%. Anyone less than 25%, chances are you're not going to be there. Your name's not going to be called when all is said and done for Pool C. But there are still some chances out there. There were still simulations in which you were able to get that, but probably it's not going to be there for you.
And then, Matt, let's just point out here as we're sitting early February, when we're talking about locks and near locks and numbers that are like at 100%, this is in 100% of the simulation. So the computer playing out the season with those teams performing at a level that they've shown themselves to be at, right? So we're not talking about they could lose out from here and they would for sure be in. This is with this group of teams, and really all group of teams performing as the computer, based on those efficiency ratings, sees them to date, right? So teams could play better than that, could play worse than that, and that's really going to have a big impact on how things shift. Again, this is not like a lose out and you're still fine
Yeah.
scenario.
And for the locks and the near locks, it really is though like win 2 more games. And for most of these teams, you have a bunch of winnable games on your schedule. So just like don't lose all of your games and you're going to be in. And basically none of these teams in any of the simulations did lose that many games. So it'd be very, very unlikely. And that's why we're calling it locks and near locks, right? Again, just don't lose out, people.
Yep. All right, so let's take a look at that list, Matt. These are the groups of teams that 99% of the time or more in the 1,000 simulations run by the D3 Datacast computer, when they needed it, were able to secure a Pool C bid.
Yeah, so just reading the list here: Wesleyan, NYU, UW Platteville, Illinois Wesleyan. Like, this is starting to look like the top of my top 25 ballot, right? The teams that are in really good position are in really good position of NPI as well, right? Continuing the list: Emory, UW La Crosse, Randolph-Macon, Trinity, Connecticut, Tufts, Washington U, Hampton, Sydney. These are all teams that are almost certainly going to make it. A team like Wesleyan, like, I don't know, I haven't run this simulation. It probably didn't even exist, but you might be in lose out scenarios and still be safe for some of these teams at the very, very top. But again, win a couple more games and all of these teams are getting in. There's very few scenarios, like 8 out of 1,000 times Hampton Sydney somehow didn't get in. That's an ODAC team. Maybe that's like an early exit in the ODAC tournament. Maybe that's crazy upsets all over the country, just kind of fewer Pool C spots available, losing all of their even like 80-20 games the rest of the way, and then maybe like they find their way out. But very unlikely scenarios. Again, the games have to play out. You have to win the games. But I would be very surprised if all of these teams do not make the tournament come Selection Monday.
Yeah, no real surprises in terms of the names here, Matt. And you also look at the conferences. No real surprise that any of these conferences would be multi-bid leagues, right? You see the NESCAC show up 3 times. You see the UAA 3 times. The WIAC is well represented, right? So these are the conferences we expect to be multi-bid leagues, and you can already see that here showing up with whether one of these teams wins a Pool A or not. There's another team on this list that's going to be one of those first teams that figure to be selected into the field by NPI.
Yep.
All right, Matt, let's go on to the next one, the solid group. So these are not quite to that 100 or 99% plus group, but of course, there's 21 Pool C bids to be doled out. Some of those teams in that first list are not even going to need one because they're likely to win a automatic qualifier. And this is the next group that seems poised to pick up a Pool C bid should they need one. Yeah, greater than 75% odds.
And you're right. We can really only have 21 locks at any given point. We're not at that time now, but you can't really be a lock unless teams have won their pool, starting to win their Pool A's. So you can only get so many. But these teams are right on the cusp of that, or some of them are. Right, the list here is Christopher Newport, 98%, Wisconsin Lutheran, even Hamilton, a team that's not really in the top 25 mix right now, still almost 96% of the time they're finding themselves in through their NPI score. WPI, Stockton, St. John's, Keene State, Trine, Catholic, Cal Lutheran, Chicago, St. Thomas, Texas. So still largely teams that are in the top 25 conversation, that are in a lot of ballots that are being named into the top 25. So again, not a surprise to see these types of names, although we're starting to see a few other peppered in there that are maybe not quite in that mix anymore. Teams like Stockton have taken a few losses, but still have a good enough overall NPI. I think Catholic has maybe, at least they've fallen off my ballot, but they're still kind of in a really good looking mix in NPI as well.
Yep. Matt, another group of teams that, like you said, have been in and around the top 25 conversation. A lot of conferences there that would be no stranger necessarily to receiving an at-large bid. So we'll see how that plays out. So now the next list is where things start to get a little bit more interesting, Matt. We're calling this our bubble in group. They're less than 75% odds, but greater than 50%, right? So that group that they're starting to be many more scenarios in which they're not in, but they're still in more often than out.
Yeah, for this group and the previous slide, I would say my message to these teams is still just go out and take care of business. If you win the games in front of you and you get into your conference tournament and you reach your conference tournament final, it may well be enough just to do that. You might not have to worry too much about the landscape at large. Really just go out and focus on taking care of your business. You might not need that much help around you to get in. Just win your games. And especially don't take a bad loss in there, right? So you might be able, if you still have a really, really difficult game on your schedule, you might be able to lose that game. But just don't take bad losses. Take care of business and maybe steal a win or two, and you're looking good. So the list here of bubble in starts at Anderson at 73%. Then it's Virginia Wesleyan, Drew, Carthage. Now we're talking about 64% here. TCNJ, Roanoke, Ramapo, Denison. We're getting under 60%, so Denison's at 57%. Then UW Stevens Point, Gettysburg, and Johns Hopkins just hovering at 50.4%, just above that kind of bubble in line for us right now.
And just going off of your message there, Matt, really the message is keep winning. But of course, as we see some conferences show up here a couple times,
Yeah.
that's not going to always be possible, right? Gettysburg and Hopkins happen to play this week.
Yeah.
Both of those teams can't just keep winning. So this is could be a situation where maybe one team, whoever wins that game, kind of steals some of the other team's odds. If we look at this like a week out, I don't believe TCNJ and Ramapo have another regular season game, but of course you get into conference tournaments, and if you need a pool C, that means you didn't win your pool A. You've lost in the conference tournament, but maybe there's a semifinal game and like a TCNJ knocks off a Ramapo or something like that. You feel a lot better about that, having that, been able to maybe steal some odds there. So yeah, while the message is just keep winning, when you look at some of these names, some of these conferences that they're associated with, that's not always going to be
Yeah.
possible for all of these teams to keep winning. There's going to be some guaranteed wins and some guaranteed losses built in just based on the names and conferences, that are in the mix.
Yeah, and you're right there to point out Gettysburg and Johns Hopkins. They have a game like right now. Maybe they'll meet in, let's just say, a conference tournament semifinal, right? So there's a couple opportunities maybe there to play each other, but I'm assuming a bunch of Gettysburg's 52% in the tournament. A bunch of those are they beat Johns Hopkins in the game ahead. And a bunch of Johns Hopkins 50% are they beat Gettysburg. So this is one of those really high leverage types of games. The winner's putting themselves in great position. The loser's going to be putting themselves in the back foot a little bit. Obviously, again, we're breaking new ground here. You want to win games and you want to win head-to-head games against other teams competing for you for tournament spots. Like this is we need the computers to tell us this. But those are the types of games that are super impactful here. Like it's not a terrible win or a terrible loss in the whole grand scheme of Division III basketball to lose to a Johns Hopkins or to a Gettysburg. But when it comes down to the nitty gritty of bubble time and you're playing a head-to-head game, like that's huge right there.
So we go from bubble in to bubble out. Kind of a similar group, but they find themselves out more often than they're in, being on the wrong side of 50% there.
Yeah, the theme for everyone is keep winning. This group in particular has like very little margin for error. You're talking about like potentially winning out. Maybe really count on making your conference final at the very least, and you're probably looking for help around you. So if you're on this list, everyone else on the list that's not you, like you hate those schools. So you want them to lose every time out and get them out of the mix here. So the bubble outs right now are at Redlands at like 49%. Montclair State, Gustavus Adolphus, Nebraska Wesleyan, 39% here. North Park, Calvin, and Pitt Bradford. Pitt Bradford's about 28% if they need it. They're a team in the AMCC. Like they probably can't really take a loss in AMCC regular season play and then take another loss in the tournament to put them on the Pool C side of things and get in. They're probably a team that needs, like their 27% is running the table to the AMCC tournament, probably getting to that final. And if they lose there, then maybe they're okay. Anything else than that might not be enough for Pitt Bradford. Like Calvin's path is almost the same. They probably still need to finish out MIAA play, like finish 14-0. That's really hard. That means beating Trine again and then getting into the conference tournament unscathed through conference. Like that's probably the path there. So a bunch of these teams really want to win out, not a large margin for error, and probably want to count on getting to at least their conference tournament final along the way, and hope for like not a lot of carnage in the national tournament picture along the way. So you want to win and you want help if you're on this side of things.
And we see with Montclair State here, another NJAC, Matt, they still have games against Ramapo, Stockton, and TCNJ on the list here. So, their odds here are probably baked into simulations where they're able to pick off,
Mhm.
2 or 3 of wins in those matchups, right, against other teams in this list. And then depending on what happens in those kind of games, as they play out, as those get into final results and no longer, simulation based, but actual result based, is gonna, you could easily see that number fall off very quickly if they go 0-3 in those type of
Yeah.
games.
Yeah, and in those conference types games, we kind of talked about it on the slide before, but you're going to have a guaranteed winner and a guaranteed loser. So the odds of one team are going to go up at the expense of the other team. So there's, even though they're both kind of 50-50, like there's probably not a lot of cases where Montclair State gets in, and like Ramapo gets in. Like they probably don't both get in a ton of time, or TCNJ, right? Like maybe two of those do, but the third one took the losses and means they're out. So there's going to be some give and take in conferences in particular. It's going to boost the one team and it's going to bring back the other team.
And you talked about how those kinds of matchups are like the really high leverage matchups in this situation. We know that there's games yet to be played, and as we're looking here, there's some chance a Montclair wins, some chance a Ramapo wins, right? But ultimately, we know that the odds are going to kind of cannibalize one way or the other. It's just a matter of which way it goes. Matt, Gustavus Adolphus is an interesting one here. They have just one regular season meeting coming up later this season against St. John's. I don't know to what extent their Pool C odds would be contingent on them being able to add a really good win in the regular season, in that regular season meeting, just the one with the change in the MIAC scheduling. They don't do the full double round robin, and it just so happens that what looks like the top two teams in that league only play one time this year. Um, so that would be a really interesting one to watch. Obviously, if we're talking in terms of Pool C, then that would require a loss in the conference tournament, whether that to be to St. John's or someone else. But I know that you talked earlier in your top 25 ballot that for giving Gustavus more consideration, like that's a game you really want to see. And 43% here, that's pretty good. But I wonder how much that is dependent on whether they can get that regular season win, um, which would probably be easily the best win on their resume so far. Right, so
Yeah.
far the resume is really built on a lot of wins. Right, it's the
Yeah.
quantity of wins rather than the quality of wins, which could be problematic then. Uh, you know, even though losing to St. John's would not be a terrible loss, right? It wouldn't hurt as bad as taking a loss to someone who's ranked number 200. It would be an opportunity lost for them to really gain, um, a really good game NPI on their resume.
Yeah, just kind of hand wavy without digging into every individual simulation here, but it feels like maybe they can afford a regular season loss, but not two. So maybe you lose the St. John's game, let's say. Maybe you still have Pool C life. You don't want to lose another game on top of that. And even still, like let's say you win out except for the St. John's game, and then you lose in the MIAC tournament. That's probably not enough to like say, oh, you're good. The only way you probably feel good is if you do win and you win that St. John's game, because like that's maybe like a 50-50-ish game. I mean, probably less than that, right? They're making it 43% of the time, and that's probably like a game that they only win 43% of the time. So it kind of is maybe more or less feeling like that's a game you really want to win if you're going to feel good about it, much less like losing any other game on your schedule.
Mm-hmm. And then a case we're very familiar with watching play out over the last couple weeks, Matt, is though we're just officially rolling out the bubble watch in this form, the NPI simulations is something you rolled out a few weeks ago, right? So these kind of numbers have been out in some form on d3datacast.com for a while, right? So as I think you were starting to run those simulations, Calvin's odds were much lower, but this is just a case where the path for them really is no different. It's just that the odds have gone up because they've been
Yeah.
able to convert some of what were their more difficult games along that path into wins already. That being, Hope twice at Trine. And so their odds have risen now that they've converted those to wins, but they're pretty much on the same narrow path they were when their odds were 12%. It's just that
Yeah.
those games, like we talk about the importance of converting, a 40-60 game or a 50-50 game to getting that win and turning that into a 100%.
Yeah, I think the first time I ran simulations, they were at like 3, 4, 5%, something like that. And it was basically like, oh, you want to get Pool C if you're Calvin? Okay, well, go 14-0 in the MIAA and then reach the conference championship game, and then we'll talk. It's like, okay, well, that's probably not going to happen. But now we're sitting here, they're 8-0 in the MIAA. As you said, they've had those 2 wins against Hope. They have 1 win against Trine. And now the computer is saying, like, okay, it's not as unreasonable for you to go and win 6 more games as it was to win 14 games. So we've converted a bunch of those who knows into 100s. So now it's still, again, it's the same exact path, right? As you just said,
Right.
same exact path. It's just we know half of it has been traversed and we just need to get to the other side. So it's still a narrow road for some of these teams. But the path does exist.
Right, right. So following the path is more likely once you're halfway down it. It's not that the path is any wider or
Yeah.
somehow there's greater margin for error now than there was before. It's just they've been able to manage the path so far. Let's see if they can take it the rest of the way, right? So that's going to be really the key, I think, for this slide, and then especially the next one is the path is going to be narrow. It's just a matter of whether these teams can stay on and avoid what little room for error that they may have.
Yep. And so let's go to
All
that
right.
next slide, Zach. We're gonna call this one
Yep.
probably out. These are teams that are currently less than 25%. Some are close to the 25%, but less than 25%. So it starts off with Chatham at about 23%. They're the highest on the probably out list. Then Salisbury, Franklin and Marshall, Guilford, Brandeis, UW Eau Claire, Whitworth, Bellhaven, Trinity, Texas, UW Oshkosh. Now we're in like the 10% range. RPI, John Carroll, Williams, York, Pennsylvania, Stevens, and St. Joseph, Maine. The list kind of keeps going a little bit because it's everyone that has even like a 0.1% chance. But we kind of just like cut it off at a certain point because it's anyone else that has not been named, and we're kind of already less than like 3% odds here. But these are the probably out, and the path for these teams is win a bunch of games, and if you have a bunch of difficult games on your schedule, you're going to have to convert probably all of those or the majority of those, and then again win to your conference championship game. We're probably also hoping for favorites to win out in conference tournaments. You want to get a bunch of those teams above you to win their Pool A. Bring that Pool C line as far down as you can. I think it was like 3 years ago we had like 2 upsets in the whole conference tournament season, and teams got in. And we had, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, where we had 1.5 billion upsets, and it felt like the Pool C line, I think it was last year, just kept going up and up and up, and really good teams got left out. So you're going to want to hope for that. Also, as a rooting guide, anyone we've named on previous slides, well, maybe not the locks. You want the locks. The locks can just win. But the other teams that are muddying up the picture, like these teams all want Calvin to lose. They want Brandeis to lose. They want North Park to lose. Take bad losses in their conference. Clear those teams out and help yourself get as far up above the line as possible. But yeah, your margin for error is small here. A couple of types of teams that stick out to me are like the UW Eau Claires and UW Oshkosh. I guess the WIAC has turned through once. So these teams will all have a chance to play Stevens Point and La Crosse and Platteville, games that carry pretty good quality win bonuses. So these are wins that can raise anyone's NPI in a hurry if you can get those wins, but they have to convert them. They can't just take like you lost to Platteville. Everyone loses to Platteville. These teams are going to have to convert those wins. Guilford and the ODAC, very similar. Franklin and Marshall maybe in the Centennial, beating those Johns Hopkinses and the Gettysburgs if they still have games left. Like those are the types of games these teams have to win to keep their NPI rising enough to get back into the mix.
Yeah, and not only that, those are the type of conferences where left on their schedule, they're going to have those type of games that a win will help significantly. But then also you're talking about the type of leagues where they probably have a really good opportunity to get a win to help themselves in like a league semifinal, so that if they can get to a conference championship game and drop that, yeah, they would need the Pool C. But had they run the table to then, there's probably a good chance that they've got a lot of really good wins along the way. But the problem here is once you're this deep on the list, it's not only about what you do, it's going to be a lot about what the teams ahead of this group does. And so you're going to have to walk that narrow path and hope for a lot of help.
Yep. Yep. And the flip side of the quality opponent's remaining coin, a team like St. Joseph's Maine in the GNAC, like there's not going to be a ton of quality there. So their path is like you cannot slip up even once. You have to get there, and as you said, avoid any sort of like muddling of the Pool C picture. That's the road. It's win and get a lot of help.
All right, so Matt, this is what the computer came up with through 1,000 simulations with games played through February 2nd. Of course, just all it takes is one game for the entire NPI picture to change in some form, right? So with the NPI picture changing with even just a single game being played and all the ripple effects that it can cause, as basically any team that is in any way connected to that one game being played would also see their NPI situation change to some degree. This is just where things stand through February 2nd. So I guess what's as we're officially kicking off the bubble watch here, what's the plan going forward? What can viewers expect as they want to track this as more water goes under the bridge and those questions really heat up? As how are we looking? Are we going to get in if we trip up in a conference tournament?
So we have been posting the simulation projections on D3Datacast.com. If you go to the link bar and you go to NPI, there's MBB projections, men's basketball projections, and we have those posted. We are going to post just above that whole view. We're going to post this bubble watch view, kind of these like 5 boxes side by side, which category is each team in and what's their Pool C if needed percentage. We're going to post that on D3Datacast.com. And right now I'm running simulated updates about every other day. If I can do it every day, I will. But there is a timestamp from the last update, so you can see when that's been, if it's changed. But about every other day or so now, when we get into championship week, or maybe the week before kind of tournaments, the goal is projections. I'll try to update those every single day because things will shift a lot. We know about NPI with every result, things will shift a lot. So keep watching this on D3Datacast.com. We'll give these views. Shouts to Drew Pasteur. He did a similar thing on his site on D3 Bubble. Previously, he had kind of these percentages for Pool C if you need to get there. So we're trying to do similar things because that was, I think, such a valuable tool and resource for Division III basketball fans. I know I used late in the season, I was posting like current date, like regional ranking type stuff, but I would go to Drew's stuff for the projections because he ran it simulation style. So hopefully we can provide a form of that resource to the Division III community. So D3Datacast.com, go to the men's basketball projections, and you can see this stuff every day. Just a note for our women basketball enjoyers, we point a link, women's basketball projections, to Scott Peterson's site data. He's doing great stuff, similar type stuff with women's basketball. He's doing great work there, so we're letting him cook. And we post a link on our site to his things as well, so you can find that and enjoy that as well.
Yeah, on D3Datacast.com under NPI, we are running the daily women's NPI updates, and there are a set of efficiency ratings for women's basketball as well. But under that same dropdown, you'll see the NPI projection. Clicking on that will go to Scott's site. He's doing a great job doing this sort of thing for the women's side. So happy to support him. He's doing awesome work, and is a great friend of the program.
Yep. All right, Zach, let's take a look at how we did in our weekly picks last week. I will go through the games. We had Babson at WPI. We both with WPI against a 2.5-point spread. The computer line was not big enough in that one, though. WPI won by 6, and we both get the point there. Out in the American Rivers, Nebraska Wesleyan played Dubuque. This was an overtime game. Nebraska Wesleyan was getting points, and they actually won the game in overtime. They covered. So, Zach, you and I both get that point as well. In coast-to-coast and non-conference conference play, UC Santa Cruz was out at Salisbury. The line was 5.5. Salisbury actually won by 7. We both thought the Banana Slugs could keep it close, but Salisbury just covered that computer spread there, and neither you or I got that point. In the CCIW, we had another overtime game, a 4-point spread, and this one pushed on us. You went with Augustana, I went with North Central. But the computer wins this one. This is, I think, our third push of the year already, Zach. So I guess the computer's doing pretty good on getting these lines. So we don't get any points for that one. And our game of the week was Randolph-Macon and Virginia Wesleyan. Randolph-Macon was 1.5-point road favorites, but they won the game by 7. We both went with Randolph-Macon and both got the points there. So let's review where we are in the standings. Zach, you went 3-1-1, and you have 30 wins, 32 losses, and 3 pushes. I was also 3-1-1. I have 33 correct picks, 29 incorrect picks, and 3 pushes. So it's anyone's game going here into the final few weeks of the regular season. And we have a fresh pick slate this week, Zach. So are you ready to go through the games?
I am, but just one more comment on last week. Go figure, the one game that we differed on is a push.
Yeah, so let's see if we can mix it up a little bit better this week. What do you say?
All right.
And as always, if you're going to play along below, post your picks either on social media or in the YouTube comments. We like to see those. Several of you have been playing along all season. So here we go, Zach. The first pick of the week is in the North Coast Athletic Conference. Denison, 1.5-point underdogs now on the road at Wabash. As is tradition, you go first.
We talked about that loss that Denison took last week, Matt. I'm not going to overreact to that. I think Denison is the favorite in the NCAC, and winning a game like this would help solidify that. Give me Denison.
Yeah, I'm hoping I'm not overreacting to that one game as well too much, but I think right now in the North Coast, home court's going to mean a whole lot, and Wabash is at home, so 1.5 points. I think they might win that game outright, so I'm going to go with Wabash. We're going down to what's remaining of the ASC. Latorno at Hardin-Simmons. This is a 5.5-point computer line. Zachary, your pick.
I'm going to go with Laterno on this, Matt. I don't know that 5.5 is really a number that you look at and think it's too big, but I just think this could be a tighter game, so I'll take the points.
Okay. I'm going to go with Hardin-Simmons at home here. I think they're maybe a little bit of the better squad. I think 5.5, I think they're going to be able to just cover this, maybe get that 8-point win or something like this. So I'm going with the Cowboys more than 5.5. I think a big one for those who know is Barry and Sewanee. This is a February 7 game, 1 point that favors Sewanee here down in the SAA. Zach, who do you like in this one?
Yeah, it's a big one because Barry is your pick in our conference champion draft from before the season started. You liked Barry in the SAA. Matt, if I was picking the SAA, I was going to go with Sewanee. So give me Sewanee here.
Yeah, this is like behind the scenes bragging rights between you and me because you said you would have picked Sewanee. Barry's got to have this one, I feel like, if they're going to win the SAA regular season crown. So I'm going to roll with them. They were my pick. 1 point line here, so you're basically picking the outright winner. I'm going to say Barry's going to go to Sewanee and get the dub. So let's see if that happens here. All right, going up to the Liberty League, RPI +2 at Ithaca. Zach, do you like RPI or do you like the Bombers?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm just going with the home team. So that's Ithaca in this case. So give me the Bombers.
Yeah, Ithaca's the team that's been showing up as far as the like in the NPI mix a little bit more than RPI. I think RPI was collecting some top 25 votes from someone other than myself, but I think they've been a pretty strong team in the recent past as well. I think we're going to get the road team to cover here, maybe winning this game outright. I'm going to go with RPI. I think this is probably going to be a low-scoring game, but I'm going to take RPI to cover the 2 points and make it a close one, if not win against Ithaca. And Zach, going out here to our D3 Datacast game of the week, it's a big one in the WIAC. It's also a big one in the top 25 standings. UW La Crosse is going on the road to Platteville. I think Platteville already won the game at La Crosse, so we'll see if La Crosse can return the favor here. It's a 5.5-point line in favor of the home Platteville team. What is your pick against that computer spread?
Yeah, they did get the road win at La Crosse early in WIAC play. I'm going to go with Platteville again here, Matt. They stumbled a bit, losing at home to Whitewater. I think this is a chance to get back on track and really make sure that they hold a firm grasp on that WIAC race.
Yeah, Zach, this is kind of a big line. I was thinking it was maybe too big, but at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Platteville. They're at home. They've already beaten La Crosse. I think they can win by 6 or more points and cover this line. It's going to be, two teams that we've seen kind of up close in person this year. It's going to be a very good game, but I'm going to go ultimately with the home team here as well. So 4 picks that we differ on, only one that's the same this week. So we're going to maybe shake up the standings a little bit depending on the results here.
Or we just split them and
yeah, maybe, probably
don't gain any ground.
All right, Zach, we got a mailbag.
Yeah, let's wrap up as we always do with the mailbag. Couple items here, Matt, from D3 Hoops commenter wants us to comment on teams with a good chance to make the tournament that aren't getting voted in the top 25. So hopefully our discussion earlier
Yeah.
breaking down the bubble helps in that regard. But Matt, I think for the people for the teams that are furthest away from the top 25, they still may have very good tournament odds. And that's because every conference receives a bid to the tournament, and so there is that automatic qualifier available to um, all the conferences out there.
Yeah, so yeah, Pool A conferences from one bid leagues. There might be a team that's better than the rest, but really not still getting top 25 consideration. So that could be a thing in the mix. But also remember, for even just like Pool C at large bid consideration, the bubble line is usually somewhere between like 35 and 40 overall NPI rankings. So there are teams that will definitely be outside the top 25 that are going to be getting at large bid consideration. So just because you're getting at large doesn't even mean you're necessarily a top 25 team, because you might be in that kind of like 35 to 40 range. But a lot of those teams do get votes, so it's a lot of teams in the mix for the top 25. But hopefully we've talked about a bunch of who those bubble teams are, and as we go, the list is going to change. So look at d3datacast.com. We're going to have this bubble watch type picture on there. We have the computer sim projections, so you can see odds for if you reach the conference finals, if you reach the semifinals, what is each team's odds. So that list is going to change, so keep an eye on it as well as we go down the stretch run here in February.
One more here, Matt. Okay, this one's from One-on-One Basketball saying, how much does head-to-head result matter in NPI? Seems like overall record is bigger factor. Let us know. And behind the scenes, Matt, this is something that we've talked about. I'm always, I think, worried that we haven't explained well enough uh, kind of this dynamic as how it plays out in NPI. So let's just go back a couple episodes. We had our episode, what every Division III basketball fan needs to know about NPI. So Matt, bring us forward a slide here. Just we'll revisit the kind of the criteria buckets, right? The old system where there was a distinct criteria for head-to-head results and also results against common opponents. So you go to the new system and it's based on winning percentage, strength of schedule, which is different than the old SOS calculation, right? This in the NPI world, that strength of schedule is based on your average opponent's NPI, and then a quality win bonus. So for beating good teams, as they define it by where they set that quality win baseline, you get a little boost over what you would normally receive in credit for a win. So there's no distinct criteria anymore for head-to-head or common results. But that is not to say that NPI doesn't consider head-to-head and results against common opponents. It just so happens that the way NPI works, it's baked into the system. And so you can't or don't need to specify it as distinct criteria because that's all based into how it works.
Yeah, the head-to-head matchup is one of your 25 or so games that the system is based on. So you might end up that you have, the last team in and the last team out are two teams that played, and Team A beat Team B, but Team B's ahead of them. But that doesn't mean that it's not accounting for the head-to-head, because if the other team had won the game, they would have been farther apart. So the reason that they are that close to begin with is because they had that result. You could even have a team that you beat twice, but you're ahead of them. And we know that happens all the time. We know that happens in top 25 polls. Things happen in certain games. So in some way, the NPI does not consider the head-to-head. In another way, another very more real way, it is only based on head-to-head matchups, right? It just takes all of your 25 matchups, it puts them in the system with every other team's 25 matchups, it puts them in the system, and it comes out. So it will not have an explicit like bonus for beating a team head-to-head. You will not flip teams just because of a head-to-head. It's just all part of the system. As you said, it's all baked in. It takes it into account as one of the team's games.
And one more slide just to kind of show that a little bit from our previous NPI episode. Of course, we've got all the dial settings, and you can just once the iterations have run and reached that steady state, based on calculating everyone's NPI. If you backtrack the math, it plays out by this very simple formula with the win percentage, the strength of schedule, and the quality win bonus. So I feel like in the old system, you felt like it was easy to feel like, okay, these two teams have very similar winning percentage, very similar strength of schedule. They happen to play each other. This team won, so that's going to break the tie, so to speak. And again, that's not the way NPI works. So if we see two teams next to each other in the standings and have very similar NPI, there is no sort of like tiebreaker. This team beat that team, right? So just an example. Let's say two teams have an NPI of 59, right? Because 59 is the example we used in that episode. That means um, that the team that won that game would have a game NPI of 73.252 on their resume. The team that lost that game would have a 44.25 NPI on their resume. And then your total NPI is just the weighted average of all the individual game NPIs. So for those two teams then to have drawn, equal, so to speak, that just means that what happened in all of their other matchups was enough to close the gap that was created by the head to head. So the head to head is taken into account because there is an advantage there for the team that won it. It's just that it's not going to serve as any sort of tiebreaker, or there's no way of saying the head to head win counts for, you know, X percentage advantage. It's just baked into, they would have the better game NPI score for that game. And then it's just a matter of how that averages in with all the other games. And we see that a little bit, Matt, if you look at the top of the NPI standings currently, where Illinois Wesleyan and Platteville have been very close.
Mm-hmm.
But early in the season, Illinois Wesleyan got a win over Platteville. Now, it just so happens that once you take the whole resume to date, that advantage that Illinois Wesleyan has over Platteville goes away, and actually Platteville makes up. It happens that Platteville, I think, has more wins in the top 100 of NPI than anyone right now. So they've played a very difficult schedule. And then, losing to a team like Illinois Wesleyan is not going to hurt as much as losing to, like Illinois Wesleyan losing to Mary Hardin Baylor, for instance, because Mary Hardin Baylor is further down the list.
Yep.
So they're two very close teams. There is a head-to-head, but that is considered. It's just not going to be any sort of tiebreaker or flipping close results or anything like that.
I think another kind of odd one is that Hampton-Sydney has beaten Randolph-Macon twice, and Randolph-Macon is 3 spots higher in NPI than Hampton-Sydney.
Yeah.
It's, again, because of what have they done in their other 21 games or whatever they've played so far this year. Randolph-Macon's results in the NPI system have given them kind of more points than Hampton-Sydney's have. Yeah.
So that wraps up this week's mailbag. We put out a call for mailbag questions every week on social media, or if you have something that comes to mind, you can leave it as a comment on our YouTube episode, and we'll find it there. We'd love to talk about anything that's you've got burning on the top of your mind at the end of next episode. And Matt, let's get out of here with a quick word of thanks for the people who have chosen to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/D3 Datacast. It was a big week, Matt, on the Patreon. We had to switch up our slide format because we filled up the previous format. Special shout out to new Great Job Team tier supporters, Carter Collins, Scott, and Todd Clevenger joined us on that tier this week. Grateful to have their support and everyone's support. We couldn't do this show without your support. And like, our model is simple, Matt. Everything that we have out there on d3datacast.com, the daily score predictions, the bubble watch, the NPI projections, the NPI tracking day by day, it's all there for anyone who wants to see it. And we're happy to be supported by anyone who feels led to provide it.
And we reorganized this slide picture, so we have more spaces for more names. If anyone would like to join at there's only a $3 and a $5 tier, so it's not super expensive to join. If you would like to partner with us for the D3 Datacast data and producing these episodes, it's fun to talk about Division III basketball. That's why we do this, Zach. Another fun episode talking about these bubble teams. The bubble picture is going to change every day, so check d3datacast.com. But for now, we got to get out of here so we can post this episode. And so we're going to say, good job,
team.